Oh yeah, DJ Nation fam, what is going on? What is happening? It's NFL DFS Week 5 in the DJ Nation, powered by the Fantasy Authority, has got you covered. Ryan Williams coming at you guys at Ryan Alexander _W is where you can find me on Twitter. And I'm here with not two, but just one of the usual suspects, the Godfather himself, Mr. Kevin Steele at Fantasy Rat 13. Maddie had to tend to some personal issues. So, Kev, it's just me and you rocking the mic like we used to do in the old days, man. I can't remember the last time me and you cracked open the mic together, just me and you. How many times are we going to go at each other's throats today?
I don't know. We'll see. But this is a good slate, though. I will say that last week's slate was kind of ass, but this week's slate looks really good. So a lot of high total games here. We have one that's a 50-point total. A couple that are above 48. We got a 47.5, 46. I mean, there's some lot of different directions that we can go here with this slate. So that is the one positive with this.
Yeah, and a lot of positive too, Kev, is we're seeing a lot more scoring as well. I mean, a handful of games last week that went over 49 points in total scoring. We might be looking to target Atlanta games for the future now that Kirk Cousins is getting things going. We got the Falcons and Tampa Bay Buccaneers putting up a showcase on Thursday Night Football here as we record this, and that game getting ready to go into extra time. But yeah, no, I mean, they went into they had what was that, a 50 burger with the Saints last week. We had the Commanders and Cardinals kind of disappoint from a game environment standpoint, but the Commanders basically carried it themselves, putting up that 42 burger. The Vikings and Packers game was lit. And so, yeah, this is going to be a fun one to break down. And we love to see the scoring back because that makes it a lot more interesting for our DFS builds. Guys, it's the DJ Nation podcast coming at you, powered by the TFA at Fantasy Authority at FF_authority is where you can find it on Twitter. We want you guys rocking with us in the Discord. The link is there in the description. So appreciate that. Appreciate everybody who rocks with us live here late at night on Thursday as we break down the early look at the slate here and give our thoughts on what the Sunday slate is bringing us. Kev, this is week 5, so that means bye weeks are starting for some teams. We got 4 weeks on bye. No Monday night doubleheader, but we do have an early game especially for those of you on the West Coast there, over across the pond. So it's a little smaller slate as well too. But as we talk about week 5 here and kind of get into it, Kev, before we get into the quarterbacks, I mean, you kind of hit it on the head, took the thunder from me, is that we have a lot more game environments that we can target. Past couple of weeks, me, you, and Maddie, Debro in week 1, even, we were talking about there's a narrow path of where we could try and find some fantasy goodness. And now that it's going to be spread around, for guys like ourselves, Kev, that, make multiple lineups and things like that, what's going to be your attack as we do this early look in on the week 5 slate? Where are you looking to kind of attack, and what are you kind of thinking is the state of the slate from your vantage point?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to go. Like, I actually don't think that you really need to pay up a quarterback this week just because of the kind of the options that are there, because I think the middle ground is really good. That's some of the best games that we're going to get from this slate. Right. And honestly, like, I'm not overly excited with running backs this week. Like, I think it's kind of like the running back position is a little gross. We also have a lot of uncertainty this week with a lot of running backs. We got a lot of question marks out there with a lot of players. A couple of them don't look like they're going to play, so that really opens up value at the running back position. So I don't think this is a week you necessarily have to pay up for running back, but I just think there's a lot of different ways you can go, and I think I am gonna narrow it down a little bit because I do think there's a few situations here that we definitely should look to target.
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in narrowing my pull down just a little bit too. Really tried to do that last week as well, with only a couple game environments that were interesting, and kind of locked into three quarterbacks for myself, that being Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams, and then got on Andy Dalton on my main team late. And yeah, paying down at quarterback, does open up a lot, because I was able to just bring him with Deontay Johnson, not have to worry about it. I actually stacked with Chuba Hubbard as well. and then you're able to, get in Nico Collins. I was able to get in the two running backs in that Arizona and Washington game, and Brian Robinson and James Conner, and just hope that the production goes to them. But yeah, this week is an interesting conundrum because all of the guys who are at the top end of the quarterback spectrum produce like really good outlooks to be able to build your lineups around. And these cheaper guys, like, while I still have a little bit of interest in them, like I don't know if they can get to the threshold that we would want if these game environments pop off. So let's talk about the quarterback situation and state at hand as it looks like, because there was one quarterback that kind of jumped off the page once the DK pricing was released to me in one of the game environments that I'm not sure is going to be that popular, or maybe I'm not just seeing enough it being talked about in the industry with a couple other games. But that's Joe Burrow for me at 6,400, who is facing against the Baltimore Ravens. Now we know what we know what it is with Baltimore. I mean, they've been Jekyll and Hyde all season long, losing to the Raiders and then putting on an absolute shellacking last week in primetime against the Buffalo Bills, who people were crowning as the Super Bowl favorites after week 4. And then, man, they had a good old piece of humble pie come to them in purple form. But with Joe Burrow, he kind of hasn't had too many big games, at least not since 2021 against this Ravens team. They seem to be able to, have his number, but this defense is kind of, they're kind of reeling, and they're not like the Ravens of old. And the Bengals need something. They need something to kind of spark them. We know that Joe Burrow's easy to stack with. You pair him with Chase. You can pair him with Higgins and maybe, another guy, but Chase seems to be the catalyst there. And Chase and Higgins really don't pop off together. So it makes for an easy stack point, and then you can bring it back. I mean, Derrick Henry just, broke everything on an island game. So I expect him to be popular, people to go back to him. I don't know if you necessarily want to do that, but there could be other options in Baltimore to run it back with that we'll talk about. But yeah, Joe Burrow for me stood off the page. And then at the top, I mean, if Lamar could do it against, well, Lamar and Derrick Henry, I guess both did it, but against Buffalo, let's bring in CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud has another, interesting path to be able to stack with. I think Tank Dell's going to be back this week for Houston as he's getting in some practice reps. So it's now going to be, the three-headed monster with him, Diggs, and Collins. And then Dalton Schultz still been in the mix there too. But with CJ Stroud in that price point, if Buffalo is able to put up points, like we know that CJ Stroud is going to be able to keep afloat there. And, I don't think he didn't need to be Superman against Jacksonville. I mean, nobody needs to be the way this team is playing, but put up 26.5 last week. And if Buffalo is able to put up points, I think CJ Stroud could definitely get there with some explosive weapons as well. And when we're talking about the pay down options, and then we'll kind of open it up for our honorable mentions, Kev. But, for me, when I'm looking at pay down, it really, I really want to get back to Caleb. I think that there's going to be a time when, him and DJ Moore, Roman Dunze get going, and what better time, to this Panthers team, but it might just be, the Panthers might not be able to do enough to keep it going the way the defense has been playing. So I'd rather play him against a team that could put up points. That leads me to a guy like Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco's at 5,500, and if Anthony Richardson is set to miss this game, Jonathan Taylor is also looking to be banged up as well, and could potentially miss too. So you're bringing in Trey Sermon, and now Joe Flacco comes in at 5,500 against the Jacksonville defense on the road, albeit, but easy pairing partners with him that do not cost a lot. I mean, we'll talk about it at wide receiver, but Michael Pittman, came out from the grave. He was able to get going. You knew that he was happy to see Joe Flacco there and just be able to find him, give him the ball. Josh Downs has really been, a bright spot for this offense as well, coming along. And, Michael Pittman, he's 6K flat, so they did raise him a little bit, but Josh Downs, he's only 5,100, like makes it very easy stacking situation there for an ugly game. Looks like there'll be some weather there too, but I mean, it's Jacksonville, so there could be points. So that for me is like the, mid-range Joe Burrow, high up is CJ Stroud, low range is Joe Flacco at this point. with the way the injury news is shaping up. Kev, let's say you at the quarterback position this week, and where are you leaning towards as we talk about this on Thursday?
Yeah, I'm gonna go right back to the well. It's actually a player I talked about last week because I talked about this Vikings Packers game, and I was saying how the Vikings pass defense isn't as good as people think that it is, but they allow a lot of the second most passing yards per game. And Jordan Love sets up and probably the best spot on the entire slate at $6,500. The Rams defense is terrible. The Packers have the second highest implied team total this week, and the Rams allow the seventh most DK points to the position. They're allowing about 240 passing games and 2 passing touchdowns per game, and they're also allowing the highest yards per pass attempt at 9.3 as well. So there's a lot to like here with Jordan Love. His weapons to stack him with are still really cheap. We will talk about it more when we get to wide receiver, but there's a pretty clear path on who we want to target here in that stack. I think there's a couple different options, but then I think after that, I think Geno Smith is another quarterback at $5,900. Geno on the year has been really good. He's second among all quarterbacks in passing yards per game, as well as third in completion percentage. And on the season, and this is a team that now that Pete Carroll is gone, we're seeing a shift on how this team is run, and this team is throwing the ball a ton. They throw the ball at the third highest rate in the league. Even in what was a blowout game, I think it was against the Dolphins, where I think they won 24-3. They still threw the ball a lot, and honestly, Geno should have 300 yards passing, and on 3 of the last 4, he barely missed. I think he had 289 yards passing in that game. So honestly, Geno Smith at $5,900 again, pretty clear path on who you can stack him with as well. Someone like DK Metcalf is definitely there. I think past those two, I think you also have Brock Purdy, who's $6,200 against Arizona. Arizona's pass defense has not been very good. We just saw them get absolutely annihilated by the Commanders last week. But Purdy got all of his weapons back here with, now, but he's still only $6,200. So there is still a lot to like with Brock Purdy. That's what I'm saying. Like, I just don't think you need to pay up for quarterback this week. Like, I don't like the problem with Josh Allen. I think if you're going to play Josh Allen, it's like who you stacking him with, because there's no. Right. It's not like before, whenever you had Stephon Diggs and it was like, okay, we know who the kind of consolidated target share that we were going to get. That's not the way this offense is anymore. They spread the ball around a lot, and so I don't think there's a clear path to like who you're going to stack him with. So I guess you could like run him naked if you really wanted to. Maybe like with a Dalton Kincaid, but like I just don't love that. Lamar Jackson, I don't really like this game as one that I really want to target, the Baltimore-Cincinnati game. Just divisional rivalry game. These games can kind of get ugly sometimes, and not one that I necessarily want to target. And then Jaden Daniels has been phenomenal. I don't know if this is a game I really want to target him in, against Cleveland. Cleveland's defense is still formidable. So I don't think I want to go there. So for me, like I said, I think for me it's Jordan Love, it's Brock Purdy, it's Geno Smith. I think are the really standout options here of players you could look to target here. If you want to get different as a paydown option, kind of talked about it last week. I'll talk about it again, but I guess Trevor Lawrence at $5,700, you can really pass on the Colts defense. But the problem is Trevor Lawrence and this Jaguars passing attack hasn't looked great. Like, I don't think I would get there. He doesn't really show much of it in terms of a ceiling opportunity. I think there's definitely pieces from that offense that I would love to target, but I don't think stacking Trevor Lawrence is the way I would want to go. So for me, like I said, I think I'm going to be pretty narrow here. I'm going to go Jordan Love. I'm going to go Brock Purdy. And I'm going to go Geno Smith.
Yeah, I like the Brock Purdy call out. I think last I looked, 28.5, maybe closer to 29 implied team total for San Fran, and we know what San Fran does when they're favored in games. They just love to put up points. They put up 30 burgers like it's nobody's business over the past couple of years, and now that we're Kittle's back in the mix there. Not thinking about Jordan Mason yet again, as his price does not fluctuate at all, and he has yet to kind of pay off where he's been ranked at. And an IU game is coming. This is a divisional game for them as well, and yeah, I could see them definitely getting right. And there's some interesting pieces on the Arizona side, so definitely love that call out. Jordan Love's a conundrum, because no Christian Watson this week. We'll talk about that at the wide receiver position, but he's getting it done with Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks and Tucker Kraft. These guys, also some cheap options to be able to pair him with, but he did not look right in that first half. I mean, the Vikings were coming out there and they hit him in the mouth early, but it just was not there. You look like, you're starting to wonder if the Green Bay Packers rushed him back too early. The knee was bothering him, but then in that second half, you just see, what he was able to do in the second half of the year last year when he gets it going. Like he's just so electric. They were just in such a hole that it made it hard for him to climb out of. But yeah, against this Rams team, like quarterbacks have been putting up points ad nauseum against them. So that's an interesting call out. Yeah, Jaden Daniels, 6,800. I mean, he Konami code, right? Like he just might be just able to break the slate. I believe we have an injury situation at the running back position yet again for Washington as well, which could lead to more running opportunities for him. And so that is an interesting one to kind of stack up. I'm not sure, that Cleveland defense is definitely about that. So it will be a strong test for him. I probably will pay up the extra 400 to get to CJ Stroud in that Buffalo game. I just feel like that game is just, play out. These two teams are going to be facing each other in the playoffs. I can just see it now. And, Stephon Diggs is on the other sideline. Like I could see the points one to be scored there. But Jaden Daniels, I can't blame people for wanting to play him any week. Let's talk about some other of these cheap guys. You mentioned Geno Smith real quickly before we move on. Is there anybody below Geno that you would be interested in? I mean, I know, Kev, you talked about paying down, but like we've talked about Watson a couple times over the past couple of weeks. And if Washington is able to, if Washington is putting up points for whatever reason in this game, whatever reason that Jane Daniels, but he's 5,300 and like, it's not going to show up in the box score this week, but like had an explosive 85 or 83 yard touchdown, I believe, to Amari Cooper. It gets called back for holding. That definitely would have changed the outlook on both of those guys. Like he's been hitting the stride with some of, over these past couple of weeks. You like to see that his, 45 attempts in week 1 against Dallas, but he's still been around the 30 range the past couple of weeks. And, it's not going to show up. He hasn't had a 20-point DK performance yet, but a couple plays change and it's been coming. So does that interest you at all? And if you were, how many teams would you need to get to, I guess, Kev, before you start looking into this range of 6K and below?
I mean, I think when you just look at it here, Deshaun Watson, he just hasn't really shown. I know, he did miss that touchdown, and it would have changed things. I mean, it would have given him, closer to 20 DK points last week. But with him, it's just the weird thing is like they're throwing the ball a lot. Like they have the second highest passing rate in the league, so they're one of the most pass happy offenses in the league. But he really has shown no ability to do more than that. Like I don't hate it because I mean the Commanders' defense outside of last week against the Cardinals, were one of the worst defenses in the league, right? But I just don't know what kind of ceiling they have. Like I think Daniel Jones would be interesting if Malik Neighbors looked like he was going to play, but it does not look like Malik Neighbors is going to play in that game, which really just takes me completely off of even entertaining the idea of playing Daniel Jones. Other than that, like I think if you wanted to go to I think Caleb Williams would maybe be the other one, but like he's only $100 cheaper than Geno Smith. Like I get the argument because Carolina's defense is one of the worst in the leagues. Their secondary is terrible. This could be kind of a spot where finally, they're able to figure it out. But the thing I don't just trust about this offense has nothing to do with the pieces they have. It's Shane Waldron is a fucking moron. Like he's just a terrible coach. So I find it hard to trust this Bears offense because of it. We look at now, like look at the Seahawks this year, and look what they look like. With Shane Waldron gone, like this offense is explosive. DK Metcalf looks explosive. JSN's been awesome. Like
JSN doing cartwheels, boy.
Yeah.
Since he's been gone, he's been doing cartwheels the whole time.
And so that's just what worries me though with the situation. This feels like it could kind of be like a little bit of a gross game where these teams don't really throw the ball as much as what you'd hope. So that's the only thing that would concern me, And like someone like Tyler Huntley, like he offers rushing upside. He's somebody that can run the ball, but like he looked absolutely abysmal, on Monday night. And I know he's only been here a short period of time, so he hasn't really been able to learn the offense. But like they have the weapons there, but I just can't get to that either. Like there's just nobody down here that really stands out to me that I just feel like I have to play.
Yeah, the top range is just it's just by far and away just so good that it definitely stands out. Real quickly, Kev, before we go over to running backs, Kyler Murray on the road here against San Fran. I don't believe the new Call of Duty has come out just yet, even though the calendar has turned to October. Still got a couple more weeks, but he's been a conundrum as well. I mean, you really loved what he showed in the Rams game, and was really the reason for them, to put that blousing on. And then the past 2 weeks against Detroit and Washington, both of which we expected to be great game environments, and Washington ended up getting there just on Washington's offense alone. But the Detroit game only putting up 33 total points. Like he just, I don't know what's going on with him, but he hasn't been able to hit a stride. But if there's ever going to be a time where he's going to be needed and called upon to be able to do something, it's going to be potentially the San Fran matchup. He's 6,700 this week. Could be getting Trey McBride back as well, so maybe that helps a little bit. But what are your thoughts there, Kev, real quickly on Kyler?
Much like Shane Waldron, I hate Drew Petzing. He just doesn't like last week was like the most frustrating. Like you have one of the worst defenses in the league, and they just couldn't do anything against that defense to make that defense look great last week. And so he just leans way too much on the run, and like his offense predicates itself on being able to run the football, and like it's super frustrating there with that. So like I just don't have a whole lot of interest in Kyler Murray this week in this matchup against San Francisco. I mean, San Francisco is like they allow. I think they allow the like eighth or ninth fewest DK points to position, only allowing 14.6 per week. I just think there's better matchups here. Like I said, like if you want to pay down a quarterback, or I think the other option outside of those three would be a Trevor Lawrence. And like the Colts have allowed the second most DK points to the position this year. They also allow yardage on the ground, but more so than that, they've allowed almost the fourth or the fifth most passing yards per game to quarterbacks as well. So I'm gonna be pretty locked in here though on those three quarterbacks I mentioned.
No, that's fair. I just like to call him out because he's been a quarterback that's been targeted by people the past couple of weeks, and with the disappointing performances, people could be off of him. But that I fully expect the 49ers to put up 30. And again, the Commanders just put up 42. They only put up 14, but he is going to be the necessary cog to be able to keep them in that game, or to be the reason why they're leading big in that game, should that be the game script that plays out. Let's talk about running back, Kevin. Running back is, to me, similar to wide receiver in a way that we talked about last week, where you just scroll down on DraftKings at your options and you see red. You Q tag, Q tag, Q tag, Q tag, which could really free up a lot when we have Q tag on Jonathan Taylor, second highest running back on the slate. We know Christian McCaffrey's situation, so enter Jordan Mason, who's the fourth highest running back on the slate. You got Kyron Williams up there. Joe Mixon, is he going to play? Is he not? 6,900. That's nice. Kenneth Walker, questionable. Like every week, he's questionable. Travis Etienne, questionable. Brian Robinson, questionable, who's been awesome. It's tough, man. And even like some backup situation, like Bigsby, backup for Etienne, questionable. Devin Singletary could be missing. So like now we don't, it's not, there's no Q tags really until we get into the 6K and below range. And that doesn't necessarily provide us with the value that we would love to see. So, I know that one value that we talked about, which is just hilarious, that they priced him up $800 this week after, he just finds the end zone and really did nothing else. Roshan Johnson there out of Chicago. You could see that they definitely made an effort to, get him in, and he was in, in goal to goal situations or short yardage situations. They just haven't been able to trust Swift quite yet, but there were a lot of inside runs that Swift was breaking off against the Rams last week. And so, no better get right spot than a Rams defense. And, now he gets Carolina again. So Swift might be in the mix yet again at 5,700. He's just tough to trust. But Roshan, at that price too, it's just funny that they priced him up $800 just off of that touchdown. I thought that was hilarious. Josh Jacobs, mid range. I'm going to go back again. I tried to talk about him last week, and the game script I don't think was fully there. But he's going to get involved, I feel like, and especially with Jordan Love being back, just makes that offense a little bit more prevalent. Look what just happened with DeAndre Swift against this team, and Josh Jacobs. They got to get him going. I mean, the Indy game, they were able to get him the touches that he needed. He's always been a volume back, even when he was with the Raiders, and that's what we want to see. It is a good game environment. Yes, he is on the road, but I do like to get to Josh Jacobs this week, and just to kind of like, as we look out, Kev, like he's going to get the Rams this week. Then he gets Arizona. Then he gets Jacksonville for his next three. So we could be looking at Josh Jacobs for quite some time here. So love him in the mid range. Paying up at running back is going to be tough for me, but Kyron Williams has just been really good. I mean, he's been so consistent. Love that they're getting him the touches as well. He had 26 touches against San Fran. He comes in to Chicago, gets another 23 touches, and is just finding the end zone. You love that they're giving him, the ball when it's time to hit pay dirt. And so the 4 touchdowns and what does he have? Like 6 rushing touchdowns, or 6 touchdowns total on the year, like in 4 touchdowns in the past 2 games. So he's definitely been heavily involved. He is my favorite pay up option at this point. Not going to go and chase Derrick Henry this week. I expect him to get some ownership, because people will want to play that game because of the total, but they're not going to want to pay the quarterbacks, and they're not going to want to play the pass catchers. So he'll be the easy like one-off piece to get to for that game, and I just won't get there. So for me, it's going to be the mid-range. I wish I could trust Trey Sermon against this Jacksonville team. He's only 5,700. Not sure that I'll get there, but I expect him to be the lead back and get some work. But they have other guys in Indy that they were running in the preseason that they seem to like, so that could be a muddy situation for me. I guess if I'm paying down, I'm looking at Jerome Ford against Washington. Dante Foreman has been kind of in and out, hasn't been consistent. So I think Jerome Ford in this matchup, yes, again, it's on the road. Not too many home backs that I like, but he's 5,800, makes a nice digestible salary to get involved. And there's a couple of the guys that I'll ask you about, Kev, in this low end range. But just from the overall state, where are you going for if you're not necessarily, if you're getting to the quarterbacks who are up there, what are you doing at running back, and what price range are you targeting?
Yeah, I think there's a few situations we're going to need to monitor. It looked like I would have thought Joe Mixon was going to come back this week, but it looks like it's not going to happen. He hasn't practiced this week despite coming back last Friday. So he is questionable. Brian Robinson has not practiced this week, missed Thursday as well. That is concerning, though Austin Eckler is back. But the big one here is, well, I shouldn't say big one, but one that could create a free square situation is Devin Singletary, who is yet to practice either. And it doesn't sound positive. I get another player who got hurt in practice. I think it was like Monday or Tuesday. He got hurt in practice because they were able to return early because of missing on Thursday or playing the Thursday night game. But so if he misses, Tyrone Tracy, who has kind of been the direct backup for him this year, has kind of been the guy that's getting the other touches. He's seen 22% of the snaps, 12% of the carries, with a 4.1% target share. And if people aren't familiar with Tyrone Tracy, he's a former converted wide receiver. Played at Purdue and Iowa. So if people aren't really familiar with him, he could end up being a free square. He's $4,300. Not a terrible matchup against Seattle. So if Devin Singletary is not able to go, and we're going to find out by Friday if he's not, then like this kind of opens up like a free square type situation. I think you have to do that. So like that's something we should monitor for sure with those players, because those are the ones that are kind of the most up in the air right now. But and Jonathan Taylor likely isn't going to play either. But I'm not playing Trey Sermon. He's $5,700. DraftKings kind of anticipated this, so priced him up, which was good on them. But Jordan Mason starts here. They're just incrementally moving him up. He's now $7,400. But I mean, he's an absolute bell cow. Handled 78% of the rush attempts through 4 games. He's not involved in the passing game at all, despite running 60% of the routes, which is frustrating. But other than that, like he's been efficient on a per touch basis, 14th in yards after contact per attempt, 16th in missed tackles forced per attempt, and 15th in explosive run rate. And now this Cardinals defense has just been terrible on the ground. They've the third most rushing yards, the fourth most rushing touchdowns, and the fourth most DK points in position. So it's going to be really hard to get away from Jordan Mason once again at $7,400. Kenneth Walker just went absolutely nuclear on Monday night, and that was against one of the best run defenses in the entire league last week. But on 12 carries, 80 yards, 3 touchdowns, also hauled in 4 or 5 passes for 36 yards, which has always been kind of the concern with Kenneth Walker. He wasn't involved as much in the passing game, so that was a plus. In his first game back from an oblique injury, he played 61% of the snaps, 60% of the rush share. And remember, I mean, they were trailing for a lot of that game. This week, you're not really worrying about that when it comes to Kenneth Walker and the Giants. Like, I would be surprised if the Giants really going to get out some big early lead. So game script is not really a problem here. The Giants defense is middle of the road against the run, 15th most rushing yards, but they have allowed the most missed tackles forced per attempt and the highest yards after contact per attempt as well. So Kenneth Walker, I think, is also a smash play. I know he's questionable, but I think he was questionable. He got moved to questionable because of the oblique. I think they're just taking it easy on him coming off that oblique injury. He still got in a limited practice today. I would be shocked if he didn't play. So Kenneth Walker, $6,800, just way too cheap for that, for what his upside is. I mean, he is a true home run hitter waiting to happen. So I think both of those guys are definitely in play. I don't actually mind the Josh Jacobs call at $6,400 because the Rams' run defense has just been just as bad as their pass defense. They've allowed the 5th most DK points so far. So I don't hate it. I don't love it either. But I mean, eventually Josh Jacobs has got to find the end zone on the ground, at some point, because I don't think he scored a touchdown yet. So I think you could look there as an option. Other than that, like James Conner is interesting depending on how game script goes. He's been also pretty, touchdown dependent, but he has been really good on a per touch basis, 9th in explosive run rate, 20th missed tackles forced per attempt, but he is just not involved at all in the passing game. But the 49ers have allowed the 4th most DK points in the position and have the 7th lowest stuff rate. So that should be good for James Conner if he can find the end zone. I do think James Conner is another way we can look. I don't know what's going on now with Ramondre Stevenson, because heading into this, I was in love with Ramondre Stevenson heading into this week. But I know he fumbled last week, and then Gerard Mayo comes out and talks about how, maybe they'll look at making a switch. That felt more like coach speak, like, let's light a fire under Ramondre Stevenson, that he better get this fixed. But maybe it's possible that it happens with Antonio Gibson, but which kind of scares me away from Ramondre Stevenson, which kind of sucks because to start the year, the first 2 weeks, Ramondre Stevenson was a baller. The last 2 weeks, he's completely fallen off. But I don't think that's really their fault. I think that's just the overall offense. But on a per touch basis, Ramondre's been awesome. 12th in missed tackles forced per attempt, 19th in yards after contact per attempt. And the Dolphins have allowed the 6th most PPR points to the position. So, I mean, Ramondre makes for a great play at 6K, but it is a little bit scary that, do they look to go with Antonio Gibson to give him more opportunities? Chuba Hubbard has been just a dog the last 2 weeks. I mean, just absolutely crushed. He was definitely in the optimal lineup last week. He is $6,100. They moved him up, but that's still too cheap for the upside that he has, because the last 2 games since Bryce Young was since Bryce Young was benched, he's averaged 19.5 carries, 4.5 receptions, 145 total yards, and a touchdown per game over that. And the Bears defense isn't one we should really be all that concerned with. They've allowed the 13th most rushing yards, the 4th most touchdowns, and the 9th most DK points to running backs. So, I mean, Chuba Hubbard, especially with that workload, is just too cheap for the workload that he provides. And so it's a good matchup. I'm not necessarily worried about like the Bears steamrolling them or running away with this and putting this game out of reach. So I think Chuba is definitely a spot you can look at. And then there's the DeAndre Swift corollary here of he just looked absolutely terrible to start the year. And now he gets the Panthers run defense that is really bad. But last week he popped off, 16 carries, 93 yards, 7 receptions for 72 yards and another score. And the Panthers have allowed the 2nd most rushing yards, touchdowns, and DK points to the position. So it is a nut matchup. It's a great matchup for DeAndre Swift, but it's like, can he do it again? I don't know. Then if you want to pay down, I think Javonte Williams is interesting.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about him.
Because, so he had a decent game last week, 16 carries, 77 yards. hauled in 2 passes as well, but he's another player that hasn't scored a touchdown yet. But the Raiders defense has allowed the seventh most DK points as well. I mean, this is a defense that Max Crosby looks like he might miss again. Obviously, their offense is absolutely in shambles with the Devontae Adams stuff. He's not playing this week. So game script should be there. It just gets it a little bit hard to trust somebody like him whenever maybe we have some other options here, like Cam Akers, who's $5,500. And what is the best matchup for running backs because the Bills have been terrible against the run so far to start the year. So he's like Cam Akers could be an option. But, I mean, Javonte Williams, I think you could, if you wanted to, who's $5,200, you could look there.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Javante as kind of those pieces below 6K that kind of merit some interest. Jaleel McLaughlin is still involved there with Denver, so it does make it a little bit tough to trust. And he's a good back. He's a good player. So all these backs are in timeshares now, but he's one that makes me concerned to have a lot of interest in Javante as opposed to him just being able to get the work on his own. I will say that Tyler Bidet, I guess is how you say his name, which is crazy. I love Mizzou, root for Mizzou. I don't ever remember them saying Bidet for Tyler, formerly known as Bidet, but he's a candidate for injury reserve, it looks like. So he had been kind of creeping into the work as well, so that could free up a little bit of space for them. But yeah, I think I do have a lot of interest in the Broncos D. Spoiler alert! So to get to some Javante this week and kind of have a pairing like that makes me has some interest for me. The other guy I wanted to ask you about too, which is he's in the 4K range, Mr. Jeremy McNichols, come on down. So if Brian Robinson does miss, it sounds like Austin Eckler is back practicing at least at this point, so he could be firmly in the mix. Last time we saw Eckler on the field, he was absolutely getting looks from Jaden Daniels, kind of dump offs and things like that we absolutely love to see. Was on that 2-game Monday night slate that could have really reaped some dividends for some people if he didn't get hurt. But Jeremy McNichols, he came in last week and was absolutely explosive. And that was with Brian Robinson, out there on the field as well too. So he could be an interesting candidate if Brian Robinson misses. And Austin Eckler can't come back yet, then he might be, the guy that we target in some scripts, because even with this Cleveland D, like the way that he's getting pass catching work, that could really pay off at 4,600. Kev, what do you think about that?
The only thing that would worry me with that is that the Browns have actually been really good against the running backs. Like the 6th fewest DK points so far on the year so far. So like that worries me a little bit. Like I don't hate it, but I just think there's better options. Like I said, like if which what it looks like right now, Devin Singletary is going to miss, then I think I would just much rather play Tyrone Tracy at $4,300. Because I mean Tracy's also going to be definitely the pass catching running back as well.
No, for sure. He might be the only option there. So yeah, that'll be an interesting 1v1 that people might have to deal with if that comes to fruition. Lastly, Kev, Justice Hill, 5,300. Is he the wide receiver 1 for Baltimore now? Or what's happening? What's happening with the Baltimore Ravens? I mean, he's been explosive. I remember we were building a slate. I believe it was week 2 with Lamar and throwing in Justice Hill to go along with him as the pass catching back because it seemed like a good matchup. But he's a security blanket, it seems like, for Lamar when they need to, when the game script calls upon it. Now, Derrick Henry went absolutely berserk, so obviously the numbers are not always going to be that way. But if Cincinnati is able to put up points here and force Baltimore's hand to be more aggressive, I mean, Mark Andrews is dead. Likely hasn't been around since week 1. I expect his usage to go up. But the wide receivers are just so untrustworthy outside of Zay Flowers. Is Justice Hill a real thing, or is this a flash in the pan?
I think it's a flash in the pan, or I guess you could look at it like a game script dependent to get there. I mean, obviously they led by a lot, but he's like it feels like this year's Jerick McKinnon, right? Like he's not really ever involved in the running game. He's going to get you like 3 or 4 carries on the ground. He's going to have to get you there through the air. So obviously last week's, 21 and a half, but he's 5,300. Like it'd be different if he was like 4,300 or 4,400, 4,500, something like that.
Right.
But at 5,300, I think that's just a little bit too much to be able to, get to.
Yeah, he's got to get you 20 to make you feel good about it, which 21.6 last week. But again, yeah, the game script was just absolutely wild for Baltimore and in Buffalo in that range. But I had to ask you about him because I think he's an interesting piece in a game that should be high scoring. Let's talk about the wide receivers, Kev. And unfortunately, we do have some Q tags that pop up for the wide receivers, which make it less fun. You kind of mentioned it with LV, the Raiders. Devontae Adams is not playing another down for the Raiders. He's going to be getting traded, so that Q tag might as well just be an out tag. Metcalf's a little bit banged up, but I think he's getting in some limited reps. So he should be back. Malik Neighbors is the unfortunate one. He's dealing with concussion protocol, and because he didn't practice today on Thursday, I don't think he'll have enough time to clear in order to be healthy. So it could just be Wan'Dale Robinson day yet again. But yeah, the high price wide receivers. I mean, we're talking about the 7K range. You got Marvin Harrison Jr., you got Tyreek Hill, who's basically untrustable right now with Tyler Huntley. Nico Collins has been absolute stud, and we know what Jamar Chase can do. And 8K is the only, 8K is the highest price you're looking at with Jamar Chase. And I definitely have some interest in Jamar Chase with Joe Burrow. I talked about him as being, kind of my favorite mid-tier option at quarterback. So I got to pair him with Chase. Those guys have been paying off dividends. But, Nico Collins as well. I mean, he's just been an absolute stud to start this year. Double-digit targets in each of the past 3 games, putting up 230 burgers for DK in week 2 and week 4 in favorable matchups. This will be a little bit tougher of a matchup here against Buffalo, but he's been stuffing. Now I will say they are getting healthy. Tank Dell is expected to be back. Diggs will be out there, and I'm sure will be demanding for the ball against his former team at 6,900. But Nico Collins, I mean, if you're playing CJ Stroud, have to at least get him in your lineups. 6K range gets really fun. Gets really fun really fast. All of these guys wore it. Brandon Ayuk 6,300. Come on, in a highest implied team total for the 49ers. Got to have interest in him. DJ Moore, I expect him to continue to keep going. Kayla's been missing him. Was able to find him in the back end zone this past week, and he's put up some pedestrian numbers. But against this Carolina team revenge game narrative, he should definitely be getting the ball, demanding the ball, and I think that he'll be able to pay off that price tag soon enough. Debo's at 6,800 in that same game with Ayuk. Like, what are we doing? Purdy stacks are looking much more appetizing to me. Jaden Reed has been an absolute monster for Green Bay, and you just see it with the 2 games that Jordan Love played as opposed to the games where he didn't play. I mean, 36 points that week 1 matchup, 138 yards through the air, 33 on the ground. Gets an attempt on the ground last week, but 139 yards through the air again for 30.1. I mean, he's the North Star. He's the North Star for Jordan Love, and the offense goes as he goes. So he's an interesting piece for me because I do love Jacobs a lot, but I might have to look at mini stack in Green Bay and LA with Jacobs and Reed because they, I don't see Reed going away just if Jacobs is having a good game. So interesting stuff there. And then the 5K range, I think you're definitely wanting to pair some of these guys. I talked about Pittman. He's 6K actually, as long as T. Higgins. Those are both nice, but I have interest in the Jacksonville guys. I mean, I'll talk about Joe Flacco and playing that game. I might have to stack and run it back. I mean, Christian Kirk, 5,700, Brian Thomas Jr., 5,900. These guys are both involved in that offense, and Lawrence is just going to have to throw, especially if ETN is banged up and Bigsby's banged up. Like, these guys can easily pay off their price tags. Josh Downs, I kind of alluded to him. Now, Dontavian Wicks is going to be the interesting piece for me. I'm curious to know what his ownership comes in at. He's 5K, no Christian Watson, going against the Rams there, has a 13 target game last game against the Vikings when they were down and out, needed to come back, and he was the guy that Jordan Love was leaning on when Reed was covered. So he's able to put up 24.8 in that matchup, gets the 2 scores. We talked about it being Packers roulette kind of all off season. Who is going to be the guy? Jaden Reed has stood out, but this could be time for Dontavian Wicks to show what he's got. Also in the 5K range for me, I'm going to be looking at Rome Odunze. I talk about it every week. He's in Caleb Williams' circle of trust. Like if he's not getting the ball to DJ Moore, he's definitely looking to see where Rome is and trying to get him the ball. Only 3 targets in the last game, kind of a weird one. But if there's any get right spot, like I said, with Carolina, get Caleb going. This could be an interesting one, a great game for Rome to step out in. A couple other pieces in the 5K range that are standing out. It really becomes fun, Kev, to really build this team, because when I'm thinking about it from a quarterback position, I know which quarterbacks I like, and I'm only got a select few running backs that I'm targeting, and there's just so many pieces in this wide receiver range that I want to target. Way different from last week when there weren't that many pieces of value. Weren't too many pieces that were standing up at the top end range to be able to pay up for. What are you doing this week, and what's standing out to you at wide receiver?
Yeah, so I think just looking at wide receivers, starting things off, I guess, with the Packers wide receivers. If I'm going to stack Jordan Love, like who you stacking him with, and I think it makes it pretty easy this week because the Rams run zone coverage at the highest rate, 8th highest rate in the league. Wicks actually leads the wide receivers with like 26% target share, and then Jaden Reed is second with a 21% target share against zone coverage. But Reed has been an absolute monster against zone coverage so far, with a 0.75 fantasy points per route run and a 4.38 yards per route run, which ranks second highest among all wide receivers. Wicks isn't that far behind either. He's also inside the top 20 in both of those categories. So I think both of those guys are definitely options to stack with Jordan Love. And so in the 2 games with Jordan Love, Wicks actually leads the Packers wide receivers with a 23% first read target share, and Reed is second with an 18% first read target share as well. So I think both of these guys are definitely in play here, whether you're stacking this game or if you're not even in a stack, just as one-offs. I think both of those guys are definitely in play. As far as the Houston wide receivers go, it's definitely Nico Collins. He stands out here. Nico and Stephon Diggs have been these zone coverage beaters for this team. They've both been phenomenal against zone coverage this year. Nico Collins has been really good. He sees a 26% target share against zone coverage compared to 21% for Stephon Diggs. It's actually Tank Dell, who has been really bad against zone coverage this year, ranks 86th in fantasy points per route run versus zone. I think for me, if I'm gonna attack this game, it's gonna be Nico and Stephon Diggs here. One thing to note is with the Bills, they do a really good job against perimeter wide receivers. It's actually the slot that actually eats them up, and that's where Stephon Diggs runs most of his routes. And so Stephon Diggs, I do think, is definitely in play at $6,900. Obviously, we have the narrative, the revenge game narrative, getting his first game against the Bills is definitely going to be in play. But Stephon Diggs overall stands to be in a really good spot here within this in this offense. So I do like that as an option. I think looking past that, DK Metcalf has been an absolute baller this year. Finally, kind of putting it all together like we always thought he could this year, but he's just been pretty reliable. Outside of week 1, I mean, he scored 31, 23, and 19 the last couple of weeks. He also has monster target games. I don't really count the Miami game because they won 24-3, but so they only targeted him 6 times. But in the games where that's been pretty competitive, he's seen 14 and 12 targets. So I do think that DK Metcalf is going to be another option that I really want to look at this week that I'm going to have quite a bit of ownership on. One thing that stands true, and it's a tale as old as time, and that is targeting outside wide receivers against the Washington Commanders. And so I do think Amari Cooper, even though he hasn't been great at
Yeah.
$6,200, really stands out. I mean, the Commanders have just been dreadful against wide receivers this year, allowing the second most DK points. They've actually allowed by far the most receiving touchdowns to wide receivers at 10. The next closest is 7. So they've just been really bad in that department. So Amari Cooper, I do think he's in play as another option there. Brian Thomas has been, I think he's the number one wide receiver for this Jacksonville Jaguars team. We already talked about the Colts
I
and how
agree.
much they struggle. They allow the fifth most DK points to wide receivers. And so Brian Thomas, I think, just is going to continue to get better and better as the season goes by. He had a 9-target game last week. He's actually seen 9 targets in each of the last 2 games. He kind of had a little bit of a breakout, 6 for 86 and 1 last week against the Texans. So, 21.9 DK points for Brian Thomas. If I'm going to be targeting one of these 2 wide receivers, it's probably going to be Brian Thomas because they're so similar in price. Christian Kirk is $5,700. And then after that, I think, in the 5K range, like I already mentioned, Dontavian Wicks is just too cheap for 5K. I mean, that's just way too cheap. But I also think ownership is going to reflect that. I think he's going to carry
Yeah.
quite a bit of ownership because of that. And he's also coming off a monster game where he put up, 24, almost 25 DK points last week. So I think you can look there, obviously, as another option. Past that, I think in the 4K range, I think Jordan Whittington was a player that I talked about a couple of weeks ago. But last week, he led the team in targets and in receiving yards last week. I do think that, he's kind of playing that Cooper Kupp / Puka Nacua role within this offense.
Yeah.
And so at $4,600, like if you're wanting to pay down at wide receiver or you're looking for a cheaper option, I think he's probably the guy that I would look at here among all these wide receivers in the Rams offense. I think they're going to have to play catch up. They're going to have to be a team that's going to have to throw the ball quite a bit this week against this Packers offense. So I do like Jordan Whittington at $4,600 as a kind of a salary saver. But past that, like there's nobody really in the 3K range that like truly stands out to me as like a really great option here. So I think that's kind of the wide receivers that I definitely am looking at. I think when it comes to the top end wide receivers, like Tyreek is like feels like somebody that like maybe he could have a game, but just this offense has just been so incredibly bad that the last 2 weeks that I just can't get there. But $7,600 Tyreek Hill just always is intriguing just because of how cheap that is. But we're not going to have to make some decisions just because like Malik Neighbors, like I said, I doubt he plays at this point. If he hasn't gotten in practice by Thursday, generally speaking, with a concussion, you're just not going to play. And so
Right.
I don't think he plays this week. We already know Devontae Adams isn't playing. So, and then I do like the call with Brandon Ayuk. Like I think that there has to be a time where he starts to get more involved. And he really hasn't had a big game yet. He hasn't even cleared 10 DK points to this point. So I do think Brandon Ayuk, and this is a good matchup. Arizona secondary is not one we're all that concerned with. So Brandon Ayuk at $6,300 for one to get different, I think is another direction you can go.
Yeah, and Brendan Ayuk with even with Samuel and you play Purdy, like just a way to get off the Jordan Mason love, which I know you talked him up, and I do agree. Like it's a good matchup, and at 7,200 he should be a safe one to get there, but just insane leverage that you're getting on a player like that. Interesting that you brought on Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins, Kev, because we had CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs stack last week. Our team was actually doing pretty well in the Millie Maker tournament. I'll have to look up and remind myself where that team actually finished. But it's a expensive it's expensive stack to get to. But when they're playing like the way that they did last week, like it's just, and especially the way that other game environments were shaped out, like so much was disappointing early on that like those guys just getting production was climbing up the leaderboards at a rapid rate. So, I think they're 21.8 in salary for those 3 guys of a 50K, salary. So you definitely need them to pay off. You're going to, you got to maybe try and get a Buffalo piece on the other side to hopefully push them to that way, but they have the ability to do so. So I want to say that. I mean, it's just there's so many viable options here in the 6K, lower 6K, 7K range. That's going to be, make it so hard for me to get to some of these guys who are in the 5K range because of the outlooks that these other guys are going to be shaped up to perform at. Yeah, Kev, just to allude to, real quick before we move on to tight end, like we might not ever see Tyreek Hill priced at 7.6. Especially with if Tua comes back, and we might not even see it. Like if Tyler Huntley is able to hit him on some of these go routes that he was just one underthrow last week, one overthrow. If those connect, like it's blouses, and I get it, it's New England, it's in Foxborough, so like not really an enticing environment. But would this surprise us if this dude goes out there and just goes out and puts up a 30 burger? Like I would not be surprised. Then we'd be looking back and saying it was Tyreek Hill at 7,600. Like what were we doing? So yeah, I'm happy you called that out. He like Jalen Waddle is just absolutely not playable in this offense. Like it has to be Tyreek Hill or Devon A-Chain getting going, who we didn't even talk about. But that's another interesting outlook. Kev, real quickly, I didn't know if you mentioned the Carolina situation here, but if Deontay Johnson, he's a limited participant, so his outlook's looking pretty decent, and he's been the guy. The clip going viral of Andy Dalton just saying he's going to force feed him the ball, and absolutely does that, getting him the touchdown. But Xavier Legette, is another guy who's been coming into his own, the rookie there. And he sees double-digit targets last week. He's 5,100. He could be a guy that I'm interested in a mini stack or a one-off at his price, and he kind of gets you that leverage off of that Dontavian Wicks, who's 5K.
Yeah, it's just I don't like Chicago's secondary is so good. They have one of the best, secondaries in the league. That's the only thing that kind of worries me a little bit with that. And they're pretty. So the Bears run zone at the sixth highest rate in the league. They've run hardly any man at all. And so just kind of looking at how this kind of breaks out, like Deontay gets a 22% target share, and actually Xavier Legette is not far behind with a 20% target share against zone coverage. So like I don't mind it. I mean, we saw Xavier Legette see 10 targets last week, and with Adam Thielen out, like he's kind of been the number 2 target here within this offense, and he's 5,100. Yeah. It's not a terrible price tag for him, coming off, arguably his best game as a rookie. But I don't know. Like I feel like if I'm going to make a decision, and I'm here and I have the money, I would just if I had if I had 5K or $5,200 left, I would consider Dontavian Wicks or even Josh Downs ahead of him.
Yeah, that's fair. And especially if Deontay is out, because I feel like the defense will just focus on whoever that next guy is. That doesn't intrigue me. But if Deontay's in, they could be using the manpower. They could be using Jalen. Tyreek Stevenson is the the lesser of the two evils who's been able to get got. So Legette could definitely shine out in that outlook, and that's coming from a guy who reps Chicago. Tight end, what a dumpster fire it's been this year, Kev. Like we can't fucking catch a break with this position. Like you pay up, you get fucked. You pay down, you're getting fucked. Like it just ain't pretty. Brock Bowers was our bright spot, and he is even having some disappointing outlooks, and that was with Adams out last week, and the offense or the defense, I guess, can just focus on him. So George Kittle, him coming back was nice. You'd love to see that. He's 5,600. Like in this game environment, I have to have interest in him, like especially at the position. He has the far and away ability to be able to put up that had to have it score at tight end that you would want. I can't trust any of these other suspects. I mean, Trey McBride, now he's only coming back, I believe, what is this, a concussion, right? Yeah, he's coming back from a concussion. So it's not like a soft tissue injury or anything like that. He's 5,900 on the other side of that game. Yeah, sure. You could probably talk me into that. You're just getting a $300 discount on Kittle. but still interested in those two. I mean, Bowers, he's 5,500. Again, it's like I want to go there because there's no Adams, but this Denver defense has been absolutely so good that it makes it tough to play any players against them, pass catchers or running back. So I'm forced yet again to look to pay down at the position that hasn't been great. You're basically touchdown hunting or just hoping your guy is out there getting some volume who can fall into 7 or 8 points. And for me, the two names that stand out the most at this current juncture right now, I do have interest in Isaiah Likely going against Cincinnati. I feel like Mark Andrews is toast. And maybe this is the week that Mark Andrews shows out, but he's gonna have to show it to me. I'm not even at 4K. Like I just cannot. The routes aren't there. Like there's just the metrics are not there. So Isaiah Likely, come on down. You're 4,400. I've seen it this year already from you. So if this game pops off and I'm looking to have a run back with my Joe Burrow stacks, I'm going to look at Likely. The other guy for me is going to be Tucker Kraft. He's 3,500, gets this Rams team. Everybody, we're talking about the wide receivers, and rightfully so. Like they both shape up well. But Tucker Kraft, if you're going to be seeing 9 targets in a game that is putting up points, I'm gonna have you on my team. Goes out and puts up 18 last week. Completely, he's definitely the tight end one out there in Green Bay. I don't even know who Luke Musgrove is. He's forgotten about. So we're looking at Tucker Kraft. I mean, those are the two guys that stand out to me right now, Kev. Obviously injuries can always shape up some things, but it's just so hard to trust anybody in this range. I will say one thing before I pass it on to you, Kev. Evan Ingram coming back. This guy has been literally living on the injury report like for the past couple of years, basically his entire career. Hard to be trusted. This is a soft tissue injury that he's coming back from, the hamstring. Don't know how he's going to be utilized. Like you said, Brian Thomas is definitely showing out, becoming the wide receiver one there. Then we know Christian Kirk's going to do his thing. Now Gabe Davis is going to miss this game, and he's kind of been kind of banged up since that Monday night, the game that they had 2 weeks ago. If Evan Ingram comes back, I do have some interest in him at only 4,600 in this Colts matchup that you said has just been giving up a ton of production across the board to passing outlooks. But Kev, what say you at the tight end position? Where are you looking at?
Yeah, I think one, Tucker Kraft, but he's also going to carry, I assume, a lot of ownership because he's $3,500. And Luke Musgrave actually probably is not going to play this week. He was a non-participant again today in practice, has a practice this week. So unless he gets back tomorrow, but even if he does, it doesn't really matter to me. It's not much of it's pretty much been Tucker Kraft has been the man there. So I definitely think, Tucker Kraft is definitely an option, but just understand he's probably going to carry a lot of ownership. But I think, honestly, when you look at this, when you talk about Evan Ingram, it does sound like he's going to be back. He's gotten in limited practice each of the last 2 games. And he's pretty, or 2 days that game. But Ingram has always been like Trevor Lawrence's like safety blanket, right? And he's kind of the guy he always look to if they get under pressure. He's always looking for Evan Ingram. And so $4,600 Evan Ingram, like I think that's a really really solid price for him, and it's a good matchup. I mean, the Colts have allowed the 3rd most DK points to tight ends, and so like Evan Ingram, like I definitely think is a really good play this week at $4,600 coming off this injury. Now Brock Bowers, you brought up him, so something that maybe I guess that we didn't really talk about, but was Michael Mayer actually missed last week. And so I think what ended up happening, if you look at Brock Bowers last week, he did not run as many routes because I think they had him in blocking, trying to utilize him more as a blocker versus having him go out and run routes. So Michael Mayer's back this week. So I think that actually really helps Brock Bowers at $5,500. I don't love the matchup against Denver just because Denver's defense, like nobody's like, so for me, the easiest defense that I played last week was the $2,500 Denver Broncos last week. Nobody played them. They had really low ownership, and they crushed. I had a ton of Denver Broncos last week. I almost played them exclusively. I think I had a couple other different defenses, but I had 60% Denver Broncos, and they're still too cheap this week. I know we're not talking about defenses yet, but it's not even. I mean, it's just crazy that they should be way more than they are because this Raiders defense is terrible. But so that's the only thing that worries me a little bit because really, I mean, who are you worried about now with the Raiders? I mean, it's Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker. I don't know if they will do that with Patrick Tan and put him on Brock Bowers, but he could. Which if they
Yeah.
did that, that would concern me a little bit. But and the Broncos really haven't been terrible against tight ends this year. They're more middle of the road right now, pretty much right around 15th, 16th in the league, DK points in position. So, but he should see a pretty significant target share. You already mentioned Trey McBride. Trey McBride's always going to be in play. He's kind of the same thing for Kyler Murray. But I do think that when you just look at when you look at the situation here, I mean, it's gonna be really hard to get away from Tucker Kraft at $3,500. Just everything that lines up for him,
Yeah.
and then past that, like I wish he was running more routes because I think there's a name that we're going to be talking a lot more about as the season goes on, and that's Eric All Jr. from the Cincinnati Bengals.
Mm,
And this is actually a good matchup because the Bengals have allowed, or the Ravens have allowed the second most DK points to the position to tight ends this year. They've allowed the most receiving yards to tight ends. It's kind of outside of Kansas City, but at least on this slate, they are number one. And Eric All, if people aren't familiar with him, is a rookie tight end. Played at Iowa, tight end U. There tore his ACL last year, so he's kind of brought along slowly, but he has gotten more and more involved in this offense, and he's seen 4 targets each of the last 3 weeks. But Mike Gesicki's still there, so I mean he's $2,700, but he's starting to get a little bit more involved. He's starting to run more and more routes each week, but he would be more of a dart throw kind of desperation play.
yeah, I like that Eric All call a lot, Kev, because Gasecki, while he's been out there, like he hasn't really been doing much, at all. He had that, he showed out against Kansas City for the 9-91, but yeah, Eric All has been definitely worked in despite all of that. Could lead to, I don't know what the numbers are, but maybe they're running a little bit more 12 in Cincinnati to get both of those guys on the field. And they don't have Tyler Boyd anymore, which like Andre Yoshivas, he's been a bright spot. He filled in for T. Higgins admirably, but over the past couple of weeks, like he doesn't need to be out there. In 11, they putting him in a couple packages, especially when they get in the red zone, and that's about it. So yeah, Eric All, I definitely have some interest in him on my Joe Burrow stacks. Love that call out. I will just say quickly, Kev, before we move on to defense, Michael Mayer has been away from the team with a personal matter. So he's been missing the past couple of days. Antonio Pierce hasn't really got into it. All they will say is that it's just a personal matter, and he hasn't been at practice this week. So if he doesn't show up tomorrow, then he could be missing, and that kind of opens the door for Brock Bowers. But like you said, like this Denver Broncos D is just so legit, and they could be running insanity and just lock up Bowers all day. So it might not even matter. But I did want to call that out, that we might not have Mayer out there on Sunday. Let's talk about defense, Kev, and it's pretty straightforward for me this week. Like you said, I mean, the Broncos come in at 2,900. I just don't know how that's possible the way that they've been playing, but seems that the people over at DraftKings have been asleep at the wheel and just haven't caught on yet. But yeah, they pose an excellent option to be able to build your teams around and just plug and play. It's so simple. But I do have interest in the Colts at 2,600. Dude, the Colts have been wreaking havoc, like low key. 4 sacks in 3 of the 4 games this year. They've got a couple of fumble recoveries. They had the 2-pick game against Chicago. And I get it. Like they've been allowing production, which is keeping their numbers down. But just a team like this that gets after the quarterback, and it's going to put up numbers in that regard. Like this is Jacksonville. So like if Jacksonville isn't able to like run up the scoreboard like some of these other teams have been, then their outlook can be a lot better. They're only 2,600 this week. So those are the 2 defenses for me at this point that I'm looking at and just starting there unless other things shape out. Kev, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the Broncos at $2,900, but I mean, like I said, just a little context here. They've done a great job of getting pressure on the quarterback. They are 9th in pressure rate and top 3 in blitz rate on the year. They have the 2nd most sacks in the league, only behind Minnesota. So, and like I've said, I mean, the Raiders are going to be without Devontae Adams. They have no really remnants of a run game. It's at home as well for Denver, which is just even more of a reason to play the Denver Broncos defense. And they're $2,900. Like this is a spot I don't really care all that much about ownership here. I just think that's just still too cheap. Like they should be $3,600. I don't know why they're $2,900. So it just makes it really easy to get there. If you're wanting to pay up a little bit, I do think the Seahawks is another option. Especially with the Giants likely going to be without Malik Neighbors, it's going to be a who's cast of wide receivers once again for Daniel Jones. But the Seahawks they have 14 sacks, which ranks top 10 in the league. And this Giants team, and especially Daniel Jones, can definitely give up sacks and turn the ball over at a high rate. So $3,500 isn't crazy or anything like that for a defense. So third highest price defense on the slate this weekend. So Seattle is another option. And then I think the other one you could look at as well, who is $2,900 Patriots. We just talked about it.
Yeah.
How bad this offense is. And their offensive line has really struggled this year. I mean, their offensive line is dreadful. And so I do think the Patriots is another option you could look at as well.
No, love that call. If you're not getting any of the explosive weapons on Miami, then you might as well just play the defense, because that's the way that they're able to stay in the game, keep it close, because the offense has left a lot to be desired. So yeah, love that call from you, Kev, on defense. Yeah, it should be pretty straightforward with defense this week. Just attack those numbers that Kev's alluding to, and let's get some points to be put up on our defense, and don't chase the chalk. All right, Kev, let's talk about the Millie Maker lineup. Let's try and run it back this week. Like I said, we had a good lineup. I'm gonna pull it up. I'm gonna pull up real quick, because I know that we were working with something until late in the afternoon slate there. But yeah, it's just me and you, man. We're gonna go back and forth on this lineup. Shout out to Maddie. We'll definitely get him in the mix on our winnings when we rake this week. But let's build out this Millie Maker lineup for the people and get them out of here. Let's see, pulling up the history here. Scroll down. Millie. Boom, boom, boom. Damn, I should have had this pulled up. I'm gonna let the people know. But yeah, we were in the mix, man. The CJ Stroud double was working with us, and I believe we had James Conner or Brian Robinson, one of the two on that team. So it was looking good. It was looking good. Kev, where you want to start off this week, man? Me and you. What are we doing?
Jordan Love.
All right, we'll put in Jordan Love. So let's just make this fun for us, and let's get Jaden Reed in there, 6,500.
All right, we're gonna do the double, and we're just gonna go Tucker Kraft.
Easy enough, pretty straightforward. And then let's get somebody on the other side, and let's get Kyron and get some production at the running back position.
All right. So wide receiver, I want to line up with him. So I'm gonna go Stephon Diggs.
Oh, playing that narrative. Talk to me, Kev. Talk to me. All right, so we got Jordan Love, Jaden Reed, Tucker Kraft, running back with Kyron Williams, and then Stephon Diggs. That leaves us running back, wide receiver, flex, and defense. $4,750 per player left. Let's see, what other game environments are there for us to attack? Running back is an interesting one. What can I give? How can I make it difficult on Kev to build this? No, I'm just playing. Let's try. Let's try double pay up at running back and just see what happens here. What happens if we go Jordan Mason in this team? We have 38.66 left for wide receiver, flex, and defense.
All right, let's just lock in the Broncos D just to get it out of the way. That they're $2,900. If we need to drop down, we can. We can go further down.
43.50.
Yeah.
Wide receiver and flex.
It's not really going to save any money, but in the flex, we could go with Tyrone Tracy. They have they're the 3 o'clock game anyway. So
So if we put him in the flex, that's 4,400. All right, what if we
and I don't hate it. Like if we didn't want to play that, I don't know if that's what we need.
what if we triple stack Jordan Love? So I just put Kenneth Walker in there instead of Mason. So it's 2 running backs from the same game, but that game could be ugly, and that gives us 5K at wide receiver.
Well, I was gonna say I wouldn't be opposed to doing a like Panthers defense either. Looking at this, like Chicago, like I mean, their offensive line has been terrible, so if they can get some pressure on them, and then I mean, we don't necessarily have to play Tyrone Tracy. I mean, that was just uh, if we're looking for a run back in that game, if we wanted one, we could just go. Well, we already got it, Kyron Williams. Never mind.
But if we did no. Let's because 47. So we could go Whittington and Kyron in this stack if we play Mason and we play Colts D. That's $100 on the table. So it would be Love, Kyron Williams, Jordan Mason, Jaden Reed, Stephon Diggs, Whittington, Tucker Kraft, Tyrone Tracy, Colts D. Or at $100 gets us to Keon Coleman mini stack with Stephon Diggs. So those are the 2 options that I'm looking at right now.
And what is the team that you have?
So I have Jordan Love, Kyron and Mason, Reed, Diggs, blank, Tucker Kraft, Tyrone Tracy, Colts D. So blank could be either Jordan Whittington for that game stack complete with Kyron and Jordan, and then the Green Bay guys, or it could be Keon Coleman for a mini stack with Stephon Diggs.
I don't hate that. So it'd be Love, Kyron, Jordan Mason, Reed, Diggs, Coleman, Kraft, Tracy, and then Colts D.
Yeah.
I can on board with that.
And we really didn't, we didn't talk about Buffalo pass catchers, but I mean, like, somebody's got to show out, and he's been getting looks. So we'll roll with that for now. Obviously, we always make room for changes, and we let the Discord know if we will do any changes to the lineup. If something shapes up, if we get crazy news through the weekend and have to change it up. But as it stands right now, your Week 5 DGen Nation pod, Millie, is going to be Jordan Love, Kyron Williams, Jordan Mason, Jaden Reed, Stephon Diggs, Keon Coleman, Tucker Kraft, Tyrone Tracy Jr., and Colts D. Pays up all the 50K salary. And that's going to do it for Week 5 of the DGen Nation pod. No Maddie this week, and somehow we still go about 120. But that's just the goodness of the slate. That's what I'm going to chalk it up to. It's the goodness of the slate. Maddie missed out on a good one. We'd probably be going 2 hours if the boy was here. But has to tend to the matters. Family always comes first. So we appreciate you, Maddie. We'll catch you next time. Kev, any final words for the people before we sign off for the Week 5 slate?
Jacob here in the chat. Hopefully you're good. He dropped a message saying I might be getting robbed, and then one sec. Hopefully you're all good there, sir. Yes. So it's a wild.
Hopefully you are good, Jacob. We definitely don't want any issues like that to be happening. Especially now when you're watching our show, man. Now when you're watching the DGen Nation podcast. So keep that money protected. Make sure you're signed out of your DK account so they don't do anything there. But yeah, hope all is well with Jacob. Appreciate everybody who is rocking along with us in the chat. Your DGen Nation podcast, the NFL DFS Week 5 slate. That's a wrap, powered by the Fantasy Authority. Make sure you're following the Fantasy Authority on Twitter at FF_authority for all things goodness with your redraft, dynasty, and DFS lineups. Link in the description for the Discord. We hope to see you guys there. Make sure you subscribe to the pod. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like the video and follow along, download the videos. It always helps us out. We appreciate you guys. Signing off for the Godfather himself, Mr. Kevin Steele at FantasyRaf13 is where you can find him on Twitter and X. Ryan Williams at RyanAlexander_W is where you can find me on Twitter and X. And of course, Maddie DFS is where you can find Maddie on Twitter and X. We'll catch you guys next time for the Week 6 slate. Until then, get this money. Peace.